Welcome, everybody, to the Steel City Rings podcast. I'm LeeAnn Lohman. I'm filling in hosting duties for our good friend Ray while he's out taking care of some other things today. But I'm joined by my fellow writers from Steeler Nation, Zach Franciscus and Bob Quinn. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
And it is the off season still. What are we, like 97 days or something from the season finally starting, something like that. And we still have a lot of exciting information to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw on Dan Patrick today, they've been doing the countdown. So the 99 days to the season started, it was 99 degrees, 98, and now today it was 97. So they're like, how long can we keep this actually going?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely every bit of 97 degrees in South Florida right now. It's miserably hot down here. And we're all in Florida, so we all are kind of suffering together in that same heat wave right now. And one of the things that's been coming up is it's a lot of talk. The Steelers went through OTAs recently, just, the voluntary players turning up, kind of showing out. We saw pretty much everybody, it seemed like, show up to participate in some level. Maybe it was a little bit of getting a look at some of the new faces, seeing what Russell Wilson has going on for him, Justin Fields. Everybody wants to gawk at the new guys. You want to stake your claim for your veteran territory. But Cam Hayward is definitely missing from those activities. He was the one player who was not there. We do know that Cam is currently going through contract negotiations with the team right now. His contract expires at the end of the 2024 season. My understanding is that Cam would like to get another year at least out of the team, hopefully two. And they're just at this kind of stalemate right now. And the question is will Cam hold out when it comes time for training camp?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago, how frustrating it is where a guy like Cam Hayward, who's supposed to be the leader, Walter Payton Man of the Year, good guy. We don't begrudge anybody wanting to get their money. But, let's be honest. You're a 35-year-old defensive lineman, and you're holding the team hostage for another contract. And if that was to help the team gain salary cap so you could sign a guy at the beginning of free agency, it all made sense. But it was weird that, hey, we need some cap room. We'll restructure a couple of guys. I think Alex Highsmith restructured, and he just signed his deal. And now Cam, I'm not only am I not going to restructure, but he's getting chippy about this. He said some stuff on his podcast this week like, hey, not only am I not going to take a pay cut, but I'm marking down names. I'm taking notes. It's all screenshotted. There's the quote from his podcast. It's so frustrating when you realize that Jerome Bettis was basically, hey, take a lot less money and you could stay. Ben was take a lot less money, you can stay. And here's Cam Hayward, who never won. Let's be honest, he never won anything. He's a good guy. He's a great player. I hope he makes the Hall of Fame. I love rooting for him. But come on now. Why should you, at the end of your contract, get this, at your advanced age, get some huge contract? You shouldn't have got the contract when you were 29. Let's be honest. This was all backloaded. It all came due. The Steelers paid you every dime, and you reward them by holding out. What do you think, Zach?
I agree. What doesn't sit well with me is that I understand he wants to downplay it, I screenshotted it, I'll remember it, but I love my fans. I don't like that kind of approach to this. Like, I'm taking it seriously. Like, I don't want you joking around about this, Cam. This is the team's future. This is a part of the team we need. We need the defensive line to be ready, and you are a key piece of that. You got young guys around you. You have Benton, who is relying on you. People. We need you there as a leader in the locker room. We need you there as an example to the younger players. And we don't need you asking for money that we don't have. It's not like the Steelers are rolling in it. We're very careful when it comes to the salary cap because we saw what happened at the end of Ben's career. Ben it hamstrung us for almost a decade. So we're smart. Omar Khan, Wydell, the whole front office are smarter about this. And along with the Najee thing, this seems to be an unnecessary speed bump and a wonderful offseason. This is a wonderful offseason. I have enjoyed every single bit of it. Even the times I wasn't sure about decisions made, in the end, everything is lined up, and then this. And I don't know Cam personally. All I know is from, Walter Payton, Man of the Year. Everyone loves him. Why does this feel out of character? Why does this feel like I don't like? It doesn't feel like Cam. So either I actually misconstrued who Cam was as a person, or there's something's going on that I'm as with all the knowledge I have about the Steelers, and I don't understand. So it doesn't rub me the right way in any way, and it's unnecessary and it's distracting. So I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of his attitude towards it. I like the fact that Benton did say that even though he's not there, he's still there, where he's talking to the players and however he's communicating. I appreciate that. That's great. It's not enough. And who am I to say it's not enough? But it simply is not enough for someone at the level of Cam's career and the kind of season this is. This is a huge turnaround season for the Steelers. I mean, a lot is weighing on this, and we need the defense. So, I'm not happy at all about it.
Well, I think two things can be true too. I mean, he can be a great humanitarian. He can be awesome in the community, which he is. I mean, the stuff he does with the suits for high school seniors to help them go out on interviews and everything, that he really got to start with because he said his dad only had one suit. That's so inspiring. That's great stuff. And him winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year, he probably should have won it a couple of years ago. I mean, but at the same time, he's also okay. He's just always. Over the last couple of years, it's really struck me as a me guy. As I start to think back of, hey, great Steelers defenders, and I look at he's never played in an AFC championship game. The only year he could have, he was hurt. And I mean, with all the dysfunction surrounding, Lev Bell and Antonio Brown, I mean, maybe dysfunction is the wrong word for Lev Bell, just, him trying to get paid. But all that dysfunction that seemed to surround the offense for a couple of years, I mean, yes, you want a defensive guy. It's hard to lead the offense. But if you're the leader of the team and he's the unquestioned leader of the team, why is all that going on? And then you read about it always every year with the fights on the training camp and everything else. He's just, I think he could be a chippy me guy and at the same time realize at times, hey, you know what? I'm blessed and I need to give back to the community. I think you can.
I think the Jagoff fans got under his skin this year. I really do. I think that there was, this podcast is a newer outlet for him. I know it's been on the air for a little bit, but it's really come into its own, especially this past season with so many fans watching it. And I think that all of the crappy comments on social media about Cam being old and too old and not that good and acting like this injury that he got was like that he's been plagued with injuries for his whole career, which he hasn't, and how he's washed up and all of these comments like that. I think they really got under his skin this year. And so then when you've got people that jump in and start talking about how much money you should get paid, I think he took that stuff really personally. And I think it's silly and it's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Because look, if I took every comment, I'm not even famous. I'm not even a multi-millionaire football player. And if I took every comment that somebody said to me on Twitter personally, I would be in big trouble. And Cam gets 1,000 times more of those comments than I do. And you have to learn to shake that stupid stuff off. You're not screenshotting this. You're not trying to prove some Jagoff from Squirrel Hill wrong about whatever he said about you. It just doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? And I think that for all players, they have to find that balance between being this great man in the community that Cam clearly is. Like, I will never dispute the work that he and his family do in the community around Pittsburgh. So being this great man, being this leader on the team that he also clearly is, but then also being a businessman where he's trying to set himself and his family up and protect himself for the future. And I think, I think that I hope that I'm wrong, that he doesn't realize the desperate position our defensive line is in this year, and obviously for next year, and especially if he's gone, do you know what I mean? The position we're going to be in, that we have to rebuild this defensive line over the next couple of years. And we need him in theory, there to stay at a reasonable contract so we can be able to do that. So I hope that he's not holding us hostage. I hope that this is just part of the behind the scenes process and we're all reading too much into it and, things get worked out smoothly.
Let's face it, if he wants to be like Calais Campbell and play into his late 30s, which I would love,
yeah,
and he needs to be realistic about who he is. He's not an every down 90% of the plays. He may end up making an all pro team or a Pro Bowl, but he's not at his age, he needs to be part of a rotation to keep him fresh, to give him his best chance to succeed. You can't pay a rotational player at the top of the market.
He's not TJ Watt. That's when TJ Watt did this, I was like, you know what? Okay, it's TJ. Let's get this man his money. Whatever it takes, we need to get TJ his money.
But when TJ's 35, we're not going to be saying that same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so if 35-year-old TJ, now if 35-year-old TJ is still pulling 20 sacks a season, then 35-year-old TJ gets what he wants. But
that's why I said probably.
But it just doesn't make sense. It seems like something we shouldn't be talking about during such a great offseason.
I agree. So Cam is not the only contract situation that has come up recently. I believe I'm getting this correct, that James Daniels reported to Alan Saunders from Steelers Now. Saunders did a piece about it and spoke about it on Twitter, that his understanding is the team does not plan to bring him back on a new contract after this season. And there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter and social media about how that's a mistake, how Daniels has been one of the better players on the line, how we can't afford to let him go. And then that idea of, is Mason McCormick enough? Is he good enough? Where do you guys stand? Zach, you want to kick us off this time?
Sure. I kind of, I like this. James Daniels has only given up 1 sack in the last 2 years, I believe. But I think me and Bob were talking while we were in the studio yesterday that James Daniels might be considered that good because we don't have anyone better at the moment. And so maybe Mason McCormick, to me, he was another pick that we made where I was like, I like us bulking up, but I wonder why we picked Mason McCormick. I scratched in my head. And now I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, if this is another thing where they're like, James Daniels, you're good, but you're still young. You can hit the open market. You can get a bunch more money and have a fresh start. But we got someone who, even though no one really knew that we had him pegged, we had Mason McCormick pegged for this the second we knew we might have a chance to get him in the draft. That whole thing may have been played out. So what I'm hoping is this doesn't become a thing like the Cam Hayward thing is, that James Daniels understands that this isn't all a bad thing. That Mason McCormick, I do not believe is going to start this year unless some injuries happen. I think Mason McCormick will be a great depth player. But I do think that James Daniels should take this in stride. Young player, great resume, 3 great years of tape in Pittsburgh if he has another good year to really get some good money in that final contract. And then Mason McCormick can slide in. So if that is what happens, another wonderful forward-looking move by the Steelers office to prove this really is a new era of the Steelers and how we do business. So if that's the case, wonderful. If it's not, very confused.
And, you look at it, I don't think this should be a surprise to anybody about James Daniels. Not, he was Kevin Colbert's last free agency group of signings. And in 2022, James Daniels was the best offensive lineman we had. He was the tallest dwarf. The 2022 offensive line was terrible. If you listen to Brian Baldinger from Pro Football Network, he has been down on James Daniels since the Steelers got him. But that being said, he's played some decent football for us. And kind of like we talked about Dan Moore last week, just because you're a starter doesn't mean that you're good at your position. Daniels has been fine. He's been a slightly above average right guard. He isn't as good as Isaac Seumalo. And there has been some talk. A lot of people were like, I don't know that I would, rely on a 4th round draft pick to be my starter, when I've got James Daniels. Okay, well, if Mason McCormick, who by all rights, probably should have gone in the third round. And I think that's why the Steelers took him, because they didn't expect him to be on the board, even though to me, I still think they needed desperately to take a cornerback there. But, if you got a guy who all of a sudden you're looking at, hey, this can be my starting guard, so I get a starting center, a starting guard, and a starting tackle for the next 5 to 10 years. Look, I can't pass that up in the fourth round. So I don't, and to his credit, Daniels hasn't really come out and, and Cam can screenshot this, pouted like Cam Hayward. He's taken it as a professional. He understands. He was a free agent before. He signed a decent contract. He got paid. He's going to get paid this year. I mean, if Mason McCormick somehow beats him out and it's not injury related, that's a good problem to have for the Steelers. I mean, you got a fourth-round rookie who was so good, he had to push your free agent to be out of there. I don't think I'm like Zach. I agree with Zach. I don't think he will push him out on performance this year. Taking the leap from division FCS football to, I mean, he's a beast. He's a bully. We're really going to like this guy going forward, but I don't. I can't see it this year. But to his credit, Daniels is taking it like a pro. I think he's performing like a pro. If he's our starting right guard, he's our worst offensive lineman on this offensive line. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Couldn't agree more. Well, there's another face that's a name that's making the circuits in Pittsburgh again. I don't know that any of us would have had this on our 2024 bingo card, but JuJu Smith-Schuster is possibly going to be cut by the New England Patriots. And of course, immediately, because he might be on the market, the Steelers must consider signing him, because that's what our fans believe we do. So the question really is, do we need JuJu back? And I found the most interesting thing to me about this JuJu conversation was the number of JuJu haters. I wish I had the screenshots from when he left Pittsburgh that were like, good riddance, we don't need that problem child, who now are like, change their tune on JuJu a little bit. Jerry Dulac, probably the most prominent one that comes to mind. He had nothing nice to say about JuJu when he was here before. And now he's like, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't mind the idea. I've changed my opinion about JuJu. What say you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, and count Andrew Filipponi in on that. I was shocked on the PM team, the other day when he was talking about, hey, should we bring JuJu back? I mean, he's better than what we got. Zach and I were talking about this yesterday. You look at the team that we have right now. Our number 2 wide receiver right now is probably Van Jefferson. We all know the names that are out there for possible trade, but this is an interesting to me kind of idea. JuJu is not, and kind of never has been, that burn you down the field, although he's had some very long receptions, but he's not, especially at the end of his Steelers career. Ben was using him as a glorified tight end. Look, if I need 7 yards, I'm going to JuJu. And let's face it, he's just 2 years removed from drawing the penalty that won the Super Bowl. On a nice route. I mean, he's a good route runner. Would it be the worst thing? Do I want to see him back? I mean, you take a guy like Pickens, who we all think has maturity issues, but phenomenal talent. Well, JuJu doesn't have Pickens' talent. I don't think he ever did, even though he had some really big seasons. But he could really speak to Pickens and say, look, I made these mistakes, okay? And they were different mistakes, but I was, and, in fairness.
Same neighborhood.
Yeah, he was 20 when we drafted him. He couldn't even buy a drink.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a guy who could, exert a little, hey, look, I had a really good thing in Pittsburgh, and I went to Kansas City and won a Super Bowl, but last year I was on the Patriots, and boy, I'm never going to make the money I should have made if I just kept my nose clean in Pittsburgh and signed a decent second contract and put myself in a position where, yes, I was Antonio Brown's replacement. Maybe I wasn't as good, but I was a great locker room guy. I was great on the field. How could they ever let him go? And let's face it, JuJu Smith-Schuster is insanely popular in Pittsburgh. I like him. I had his jersey once. You know, he's a good guy. I like him. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him come back. I'm kind of like Pony and Duloc. I know Zach has a different take on this stuff.
Well, I was watching a political show a little bit ago, where the main character, when he went to school, he was, a really, really bad student, caused a lot of problems. Then he went into politics and became a really upstanding citizen. Everyone respected him. And then there was a situation where he had to go back to his school and got completely wasted in the library, and all of his friends caused ruckus again. Just because Juju Smith-Schuster went to somewhere else and suddenly found a maturity level doesn't mean that when he comes back here, there's not going to be a chance that he falls back into that kind of, I get to have fun. It's a TikTok thing. I remember Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was fun because I got to be a little more free. That's what I'm worried about. That number one, I don't think we really need that. And looking into that, I thought Van Jefferson was a lot older than he was. I don't know why, but Van Jefferson and JuJu were the same age, and Van Jefferson just has less tread on the tires. So I don't know if we even need to put JuJu in that situation. If the Steelers do get him, I double checked over the cap with this. It'll most likely be a trade because if they cut him, that's like $9.6 million in dead money for JuJu. And for anyone not marrying Russell Wilson, you're not taking that kind of dead money. So will the Steelers trade for JuJu? Because if the Patriots trade him, it's only like $2.6 million in dead money. So what do we want to give up for JuJu? Do you give something up for JuJu? If they do cut him, like if JuJu really caused that much issues, then you have to wonder if they took that much dead money, do we want? So nothing really points me in the direction of saying JuJu is the best option for this. We already have a JuJu right now in Van Jefferson. I don't feel the need to bring someone on just so we can have some nostalgia.
Yeah, I don't know how LeeAnn feels about this, but I mean, Van Jefferson is an intriguing talent, but at least JuJu does have a couple, pretty big seasons under his belt, and pairing him up with
Van Jefferson is best known for his wife having a baby during the Super Bowl, not for like any magical catch he's made or any big gain he won. I mean, he has less tread on the tires because he doesn't have the talent that JuJu or a lot of other players has. And that's not even a knock against Van Jefferson. I think he's fine for the kind of depth piece he is. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know that it's quite fair to JuJu to compare the two of them on an even playing field.
I think Roman Wilson
only has 1,600 yards in his Jefferson's 1,600 yards in his career, 10 touchdowns. That's what are you going to pay for that kind of average? So that's what I'm saying. We already have that. JuJu might add a little bit more, but Van Jefferson is nothing special. But I don't think we need him to be. I don't think we brought him in to be a 600-yard catcher. If he catches 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, he's there to be a little. I think he's there to make sure Pickens and Roman Wilson can do their thing. That's one of what I feel he's there to be.
That's a good point, Zach. If he's like kind of a 3A, 3B with Calvin Austin, like, okay, we're going to put you in when we want Wilson coming across the middle, but when we want Calvin to either go deep or, from the slot and try to beat the slot corner, I think if he's part of a rotation as that 3rd, 4th, 5th receiver, could be an interesting talent. I think the problem becomes if he becomes our true number 2, because Roman Wilson, although by all reports he's doing phenomenal, if Roman Wilson somehow falls back a little bit, or, hopefully Arthur Smith is not going to be like the previous regime and just say, we're not going to start a rookie, then it becomes, okay, well, what are we doing here, folks? But that being said, I mean, I don't think JuJu necessarily is getting cut from New England because he caused problems. I agree. I think they just can't afford him. I mean, I also don't think they have any clue what they're doing with wide receivers. I mean,
the whole team.
That's since Tom Brady left. That's where they go to die.
Yeah. I think JuJu. Look, I I was never the person who was like down on JuJu when he was in Pittsburgh. Do you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily love all of the silly antics. Do you know what I mean? Mostly because I don't like things that are distracting from the team. And I felt like at times he was a distraction. But I'm not that like old person who's like, JuJu and all his silly antics and he's so bad. And, and back in my day, wide receivers didn't act like that. Lynn Swan would have never. Like, I just don't, whatever. I think that people didn't necessarily understand him. I think JuJu is a really accurate representation of what 20-year-olds are like in today's society, or when he was 20. And I think the stuff that he was doing is the same stuff that every 20-year-old does. I mean, we all know that young men's brains aren't fully mature till 25, and JuJu was 5 years away from that when we drafted him. So I didn't particularly find anything that he did so outrageous. He wasn't doing some of the things we see from other players, drunk driving or doing drugs or doing domestic assault. I mean, the things that are happening in other places, doing a TikTok challenge or jumping off a milk crate or whatever, just wasn't the be all end all for me. But I don't like the distraction. I don't like that he brought all this negative attention to the team from various outlets. And so I do think that, as time has gone on, I think he's matured. I don't think that New England is so good at handling behavior problems that JuJu's been tamped down for the past couple of years and like just waiting to explode. I just think he's grown up like most 20-somethings do. And I think he's serious. And I do agree that I think he probably realizes he maybe shot himself in the foot a little bit. He had a great thing going. And just because he got a Super Bowl in Kansas City, he might have had a lot better gig happening the long term if he'd stayed in Pittsburgh, because the fans really did love him. The fans here loved him, a lot of them. Yeah. So I don't know that I think we need him, but I don't think it's I wouldn't be like furious if they signed him. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that he's quite the answer to what we needed, a number 2 wide receiver, but I don't think it would be the worst thing if the price was right. I agree though. What does that trade look like? And what are we willing to give up for that?
Well, the more you talk, I'm wondering here. I'm like, I have to check how much we paid to bring in Van Jefferson. But if Van Jefferson is supposed to be the Allen Robinson of this year, then technically JuJu would be a better Allen Robinson than Van Jefferson is, because JuJu has more experience. JuJu understands, like you just said, LeeAnn. That was a great point about maturing and being able to come back to Pittsburgh because you shot yourself in the foot with it the last time. If that's the case, then we didn't pay that much for Van Jefferson. Let's do a really quick turnaround and bring JuJu in. If he's supposed to be the veteran, JuJu's much more of a veteran than Van Jefferson is.
Yes.
Which, by the way, saying veteran Van Jefferson is a very difficult sentence if they had to think about that.
You could make the case JuJu, if he did come back. And first of all, I don't think we should trade for him. New England's going to cut him and do us a favor. We could sign him for the minimum on Sunday. So why are we going to help the Patriots out? I mean, other than, hey, here's a backdoor thank you for the Broderick Jones trade. But JuJu could be the redemption story that Lev Bell wanted when he floated the idea of a comeback. I'm a free agent. I'm on the street. Look, if you'll give me a few $100,000 over the veteran minimum, I want to come back to Pittsburgh at least for a year. I mean, he took less than market value to come back for a year, a couple of years ago before we let him go.
Yeah.
It is redemption season in Pittsburgh. You talk about the amount of people that came to Pittsburgh to prove that they have more than what everyone thought they did. Join the ranks. Prove what you got. Let's see that. Wow.
Nobody has a bigger ego than a professional athlete. Do you know what I mean? So who wouldn't love the idea of a redemption story to come back? I mean, we hear it from them all the time, and I don't think JuJu's any exception. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. This week in the news, there's been a lot of talk about Steelers rivalries and what the greatest rivalries are in sport. And Deshaun Watson made a comment about how he believes the Steelers-Browns rivalry is the best rivalry of all. And then yesterday or the day before on their podcast, Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco said they totally disagree. They think it's the Steelers-Ravens rivalry. which kind of fed into a conversation or comments that were made by Jaylen Warren about playing with Patrick Queen now, and having this guy come over from this team. It's your heated rival. You've been cussing him across the line for years. And now all of a sudden, he's your teammate. You got to trust him. You got to put your faith in him. You got to line up next to him or whatever and practice with him. And that shifting gears, the trash talking is not easy. And Warren was quite honest about it, that it's taken a little getting used to see Patrick Queen in black and gold. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious what you guys think is the greater rivalry. And is it Ravens, is it Browns, or something else? And what do you think about that idea of players shifting from one team to another?
Okay. Let me jump in here real quick and just say Deshaun Watson is absolutely right. The Browns-Ravens are the greatest rivalry in the NFL. The problem is the Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore 20 years ago, and he's got the wrong Cleveland Browns. Hate to tell you, Cleveland Browns fans, just because you're an expansion franchise and you got to keep the records, Art Modell moved the Browns to Baltimore. I'm sorry it happened to you, but it did happen. So the now Baltimore Ravens are the Steelers' biggest rivals, not the expansion Cleveland Browns.
AFC North games are still AFC North games, each one. But even I remember the days of the Troy Polamalu's and the Ray Lewis and the Ed Reeds and Ben fixing his own broken nose on the sideline. We're not there. That's epic. That's kind of a era in the NFL that will be remembered. But there's still just something different in the air when it's Steelers Ravens. Even though the NFL as a whole might be a little bit like Steelers Ravens. In Pittsburgh, it's Steelers Ravens. You want to hit that guy now. Rookies are coming in. The first thing they know when they get to Pittsburgh or Baltimore is, by the way, we hate those guys. We hate those guys. And so the funny thing is, it's like Jaylen Warren and Patrick Queen are coming at this from two different angles, because Jaylen Warren was saying, it's kind of difficult. Patrick Queen came into this saying, I expected everyone to, be on my back and all this. And I don't know if you watched the interview. Right at the end, TJ Watt screams from the other end about how happy he is to be there. There's a camaraderie that's already there that Patrick Queen was surprised about, because it's Steelers Ravens. So, and especially Patrick Queen's been 4 years in Baltimore, right? That's more than enough time to learn to really hate the rivals. So it's exciting. I absolutely believe it's still Steelers Ravens, and that's just how. It's not because I want it to be. It's not a nostalgia thing. It's because of how I feel on that game day when I know it's Steelers Ravens. Even if Mike Tomlin's never had a non-losing season, but if we were in that situation where we had nothing to play for, I truly feel it would still mean as much to us. So Steelers Ravens, no question.
I have to say that to be a good rivalry, there has to be a competitive spirit that happens there. And I realize the Browns of today and the past couple of years are not the Browns of yore, but they have not been a competitive team for decades. And frankly, the Ravens have. I mean, almost since their early days, the Ravens have always provided really stiff competition for the Steelers, whereas the Browns were somebody that used to be, that was your easy, you could rest your starters kind of game and beat up on the Browns and Tim Couch or whoever was their quarterback then. But that's, and so while that's not the case now, that takes a long time to me to build up that level of competitive hatred, you know what I mean? Which is not to say you like them anymore. It's just not, I agree with Zach. It's not this, doesn't have the same oomph behind it.
And just to include one thing and pick up on what LeeAnn is saying, I saw some talk this week where people were floating, hey, the Steelers haven't finished last in the division since 1988. It's the longest streak in the NFL by far. I think the next closest was Green Bay in 2005. The Cleveland Browns have not won their division since 1989. So that's just as impressive a streak. Now, if you're an older fan like me and you go back to the 70s and the 80s, there was, yes, we hated the Browns. I mean, they were, Turkey, whatever his name is, who hurt Bradshaw and got in a huge fight with Joe Green. Yeah, we hated those guys. I think we hated Dallas a little bit more, but yes, we saw Cleveland twice a year. But that being said, if you were talking about that, I think Ben, they didn't even get to like 7 or 8 wins against Ben during his whole career. Yeah, great. You won a playoff game against us in 2020. Big deal. I mean, when you get to double-digit wins as a franchise against us, and it's been 20 plus years,
right? Let us know.
Let us know, and then we'll talk about it. Hey, you could kind of make the same argument now for the Ravens. We've kind of owned them the last few years. I think we're 8 of the last 9 or 8 of the last 10 we've beaten them. So maybe we should be mad at the Bengals.
So how fast do you guys adopt somebody like a Patrick Queen to be our own? Like how fast is somebody that you said horrible things about for 4 years, how fast do you suddenly put your trust in your heart to as a fan?
I killed Patrick Queen for the Kenny Pickett hit. Sorry, Zach. I killed Patrick Queen for the Kenny Pickett hit where he grabbed his face mask and drove him to the ground. It should have been called. It was a ridiculous hit. I was a Patrick Queen fan the minute he signed the contract.
That's right.
For me, it depends on what have you done to make me like. If you're just on the team, I'll hate you generally. But like Ray Lewis gave me plenty of reason to personally not like you. Patrick Queen never gave me that. Patrick Queen was always a guy when I looked at him, I was envious of the Ravens. I'm like, oh, that guy, look at, and I was never a Kenny Pickett fan. So Bob, that moment didn't really, upset me as much. But I like that. He never gave me a reason to personally hate him, which meant he didn't go overboard in any place. He wasn't TJ Hushman's shoes with a terrible towel. So he never did anything like that in the rivalry. So whenever he came here, I had very few things to put to bed with it. It was kind of like, oh, he's a Raven. And then I laughed because we got one over on the Ravens and I was fine with it. But even before that, I was fine. So it depends on what that player has done to me. For example, Aaron Rodgers, I can never, ever, ever like Aaron Rodgers because of what he did in that Super Bowl. I don't care what he does in his person. I cannot like Aaron Rodgers. Now, luckily, he's a horrible person in general and just not good at being a human. So it makes it easier. But
I
that
don't know
Super Bowl sits in my soul.
I understand, Zach, but if he had done the black and gold a couple of years ago, I think we all would have figured out a way.
I don't know. I never got over Michael Vick. I never, he's the one player in my entire life that I could not get behind. I cheer for the team. I couldn't get behind cheering for him. I don't care what pretend restitution he did. I can't get over it. And yeah, I never.
Well, I mean,
I fight with people about this on Twitter all the time.
What was he, 3 years in prison or was it 2?
I don't remember 2, I think. But
I think when a guy goes to prison, then it's okay to give him the redemption story. I love dogs. I have 2 dogs. But, at some point, if a guy makes a big mistake and he goes to prison to pay for it and he doesn't get the I went to jail for 30 days thing, he went for a couple of years at least.
Yeah, he went.
So
I don't mean that I don't think the man doesn't have a right to go out and restart his life and be a part of productive member of society. I don't mean that on any level. I just don't want him on my team. I don't want to cheer for somebody that supported what he
Michael
did.
Vick, it sounds like a very like I have to remind myself that Michael Vick was a Pittsburgh Steeler. It sounds like that trivia thing where everyone's like, oh yeah, that's right. So I don't really remember it all too much.
And I was a Michael Vick fan. I grew up and spent a good chunk of my childhood in Northern Virginia, and he was playing at Virginia Tech. I had friends that went to Virginia Tech. We would go to games there. Do you know what I mean? I was a big Michael Vick fan, so I cheered for him in the way that I cheered for like a Larry Fitzgerald. Do you know what I mean? Just on the periphery in the NFL, I wanted good things to happen for him. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, I felt like extra let down by it because I saw him as this little bit of a hero. And then, I don't know. I don't do well with that stuff. Animal stuff will always be trump everything else for me.
I absolutely get that. Especially when there's that extra depth of, you watch that guy for a bit. Because for me, that was, he never did anything bad personally, but Rod Woodson broke my heart when he left the Steelers.
Oh,
so I remember that personally, that
it took forever to forgive James Harrison. I mean, I was crushed. You know what I mean? Like, how could you do this? how could you do this? But then he kept doing it, and I just got used to it.
It was Levon Kirkland for me because he was one of those few young guys, and the Steelers had that reputation for so long where if you left the Steelers, there was a reason we didn't want you. So you went somewhere else and wasn't very good.
Right.
Levon Kirkland had a very nice career in Seattle. So I mean, to me, he was the one who got away. And guys like I think like an Emmanuel Sanders, although it's kind of hard to be mad at him because let's face it, the Steelers said, we're going to pay Antonio Brown. Look, you want to stick around for the veteran minimum or you want to go sign a big contract somewhere else? Okay. So
I've never begrudged anybody going on and having a career. Do you know what I mean? Their time in Pittsburgh is done. Do you know what I mean? You didn't hit like Hines Ward level or whatever where we're going to keep you here for your whole career. So I would never begrudge anybody like Emmanuel Sanders for going off and playing another year. But I struggled with some of the guys that like Joey Porter, Villanueva. Do you know what I mean? That just like I had to have this one more year, and so you go somewhere on Alan Faneca, Tunch Ilkins. You know what I mean? You're going to go on and have this, you're just not ready to let it go. And like, as a human, like I get it. Do you know what I mean? But in my heart, it like hurts.
Don't you feel like the Steelers were kind of done with Joey Porter though, when they let him go to Miami? I mean, and he had a couple nice years down there. I thought like
he should just retire, but like that's ridiculous and so selfish of me. Do you know what I mean? Like it is. I understand and rationalize like how completely selfish and ridiculous that is.
At least have the decency to play bad.
Right. At least suck while you're there. Like Villanueva.
That's true. That's what I'm kind of. I don't want to have to get ready for that with Najee. I want this redemption story of the Steelers to include him. Where, he's just not just, oh, look, it's him and Warren. And what I'm worried about, especially with that, just a really quick shift, is the Steelers' offensive line is going to become so good that it's not going to make sense to invest heavily in a back. Where even though we like that as Steelers, the Jerome Bettises and the Bam Morrises and all the guys that I remember, the big back, there's no reason to really invest in those. And so I will do what Denver has done for years and like just back after back after back after back after back after back. And you kind of forget the names of the backs that are going through because that's I don't want it to happen, but I'm wondering if how things are shifting and the declining of that, of the option, if that's where we're heading. So I'm trying desperately to prepare myself for it. But as you can see, it's going to hurt so bad if it happens. So but luckily everything I've heard, especially from running backs, Jalen Warren said how happy he was with the offense. Everything's going well with the offense, so I'm hoping that helps.
Well, and you look at, some of this analytics move started, going all the way back to like Emmitt Smith, the great back, NFL leading rusher, but there was always that argument of, look, if Barry Sanders ran behind Emmitt Smith's line, he'd have 25,000 yards. So I think it started to shift where teams started to recognize, hey, look, we don't need the best running back. We need a good running back who's just willing to hit a hole. We need to invest in the offensive line. And post Jerome Bettis, all the Steelers' investments in offensive line have been pass protectors, whereas I do feel like right now with Broderick, with Isaac Seumalo, with Zach Frazier, James Daniels or Mason McCormick, and I think it'll be McCormick long term, but James Daniels this year, and Fatanu, I think they're building a road grading offensive line who they're hoping will hold up in pass protection, but is designed to push people off the ball and run the football. Yeah. And, Najee could turn around and have a great year and still leave because he may be getting hit 2-3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and get to the point where he earns a Saquon Barkley type contract.
Yeah.
Steelers aren't going to pay him that. Steelers weren't going to pay Lev Bell that. Although it would be the height of hilarity to me if Lev Bell, best back in the NFL just, 5-6 years ago, we won't pay him $13 million, but now Najee goes out and gets a $13 million contract from somebody. And let's face it, Najee, I like him, but he's no Lev Bell.
Yeah.
Lev Bell in his prime was something.
Seriously.
There's when you talk about graceful football players and other running backs have tried to like imitate the hesitation behind the line. You just watch, he would just stop and just look. I've never seen any.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree. So as much as I love Najee, and I love Najee, Le'Veon Bell was something different, and that's why I was mad at the Steelers when that happened. I was like, it's Le'Veon Bell, pay him, and but as much as it pains me to say that about Najee, I will absolutely agree with you on that. So, but the Steelers, I love what they're doing with the offensive line, so I can't be mad at it. I wanted them to do this, so it makes me happy. But actually, it comes right back to the Steelers and Ravens rivalry. To be able to have that kind of a rivalry, the trenches guys have to be there. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Big old Ravens defender in the middle. Oh, he passed away a bit ago. His name is Saragusa. Tony Saragusa. All those guys.
Oh, I hate him. Haloti Naga too, though. Yeah.
Oh,
God, I hated
the big guys in the trenches. So the Steelers we know what it means to compete in the AFC.
Maybe that's part of why that rivalry means what it does. I mean, you look at the teams. I mean, look, certainly it's like a triangle, geographically with Cleveland, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. And the three teams all have a lot in common demographically, near rivers. Like they have all of these crazy things in common. They're blue collar cities that take a lot of pride and hard work and all of these things. But the Steelers and Ravens are both teams that at their best have always been built around their trenches, both offensively and defensively. Do you know what I mean? The Browns have tried to build around flash a little bit more, and the pass game. And I think that maybe that's part of it. In the Ravens, we see ourselves, and in the Steelers, the Ravens see themselves a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an excellent point.
Back when they had all the commercials with "This is Baker's house." Well, Baker was renting that house, and Ben owned it. So.
Ben held his mortgage. All right, one more question for you guys. So we've been talking about rivalries in the AFC North in particular. We've kind of left out the Cincinnati Bengals entirely, but the Steelers have always carried a secondary rivalry. It's been the Dallas Cowboys, it's been the Oakland Raiders, it's been the New England Patriots for years. I mean, you would have thought that Tom Brady and the Patriots were in our division the way we had this rivalry. Do we have a rivalry for this generation like that? The Patriots are no more. They're dismantled. So who is this next rivalry? If it isn't a team that we're currently playing right now, who do you see as a potential up-and-coming rivalry for the Steelers for the future out of the division?
I don't know how Zach feels, but I mean, maybe it'll change now that Belichick got fired. But, Patriots beat us the last 2 years. They weren't very good. And you could argue that that loss cost us the playoffs because that's a game we should have won in 22. And last year, if we had ended up losing out, that's the game that was inexplicable. I mean, they were terrible. So as far as right now goes, it'll be interesting to see if we could beat Kansas City once just to show them who we are. Then, yeah, I mean, I think a rival like that with the Chiefs. I think the fact that, we've gone to Buffalo the last couple of years. I mean, Ben's last year when we beat him when TJ had the big game and caused the fumble. I mean, that looked like it could have been on track especially with the coaches' relationship, but they stomped us the last couple of years. So and in the playoffs it wasn't okay. It wasn't stomped, but they still beat us by 2 touchdowns. So
the Patriots definitely owned us with Tom Brady. They definitely had our number most years, but we were at least always competitive. We gave them trouble. We beat them enough times that we were in that race. You know what I mean? It's hard to look at the Chiefs and feel like we're in any kind of race with them over the past couple of years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, could be interesting. I kind of want to see how the Denver game goes because that could be one that turns into something while Sean Payton's there and if Russell Wilson does good here, that could turn into a little something. And Denver and the Steelers have a history of not liking each other.
That's true. You mentioned the Bills. To me, that stands out because to me, the secondary rivalry is always going to be someone who, like LeeAnn was saying, who matches us, like the Ravens. I remember the New York Jets with Curtis Martin whenever he was their running back, and the Jets had a hard-nosed defense with was it Jonathan Vilma was there with them for a little bit, and it was just hard-nosed team against hard-nosed team, and Bettis and Martin were right next to each other on the all-time rushing list, so they were always jumping. I don't know if there's anyone outside the Bills to me that stands out as someone like the stomping us kind of helps because I think as a team gets better, that you look back and you're like, well, of course, look at the team we had then. If we would have beat the Bills, it would have been a major upset. We kind of deserved to get stomped at that moment. I mean, looking back in a couple of years, I don't think we're going to be surprised that the Mason Rudolph-led Pittsburgh Steelers did not beat, Josh Allen and the Bills. It would have been a major upset. So the Kansas City
Would like to
Chiefs
see
aren't
that
really
game
a
in the
rivalry.
snow, though.
Yeah.
I love snow games. Love snow games so much. Love snow games. But I like what you said. The Chiefs aren't a rivalry, but they are a bar. Like when we play the Chiefs, I will be looking to see how good are we, because you can hide a lot of stuff against mediocre teams and hide a lot more against bad teams. We played the Chiefs the last couple times. We've hung on for the first quarter and a half, and then just like some merry-go-round spun too fast, we just flew off. We have to show, even if we don't beat them, show that we can hang with the Chiefs. If we can hang with the Chiefs in the first year of a rebuilt offense, that'll be great. And that could lead to what the Steelers and Patriots had. If we have, maybe Justin Fields is the, quarterback for the future in Pittsburgh. We have Mahomes and Fields back and forth every year. That would be fun. But outside of the AFC North and the Bills, I don't see anyone as being like a rival for me right now.
And let's
I
face
hope
it,
that the Eagles were going to become that rival. I love the interstate, which side of the state Sheets and Wawa, and so I kind of hope that was going to become that with the Eagles a little bit. And I feel like we do have that spirit whenever we play them, but we have just had no identity, you know what I mean, for a while now. So the Eagles have been a better team and the Steelers have been on the decline. And so it's hard to feel like you're very competitive, when you're struggling to kind of be able to beat them. We also always still have, to me, a bit of a rivalry with the Raiders. It doesn't matter what city they move to. The Steelers historically struggle with the Raiders for some reason. And those games are always, it doesn't matter how bad they've been over the years, we always have to play them close. And so that's another team where I feel like we haven't ever quite let go. If you're a little bit older and, you either remember some of those games from the 70s or you have parents that talked about them incessantly, that rivalry still is embedded in your DNA.
Yeah, and in the 80s too, because they stomped us and destroyed us in the divisional round in 83. But then when we played them in 84, and a team that probably shouldn't have made the playoffs, but Frank Pollard still one of my all-time favorite Steelers. They figured out a way into the playoffs and they beat the Raiders in the first round. And I mean,
but again, those were teams, like we said about the Ravens, so similar in dynamic with these incredible tough defenses with these scary guys. And they were just, you know what I mean? They were so competitive. It was fantastic to watch.
As far as the Eagles go, LeeAnn, let's face it, we haven't been very competitive against them. We haven't beaten the Eagles in Philadelphia since 1965.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Not to give away my age, but that's not in my lifetime.
So, Bob is not that old.
Close, but not quite that old.
Well, guys, we appreciate everybody watching today, coming out and watching the show. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Six Steel City Rings podcast. We would love to hear from you. We would love your feedback. You can see all of our Twitter or X usernames are up on the screen. We'd ask you to please, if you watched the show, watched any of it, we'd appreciate if you would share, and subscribe to the show. It helps us get more exposure on YouTube when people are searching for Steelers or Steelers related content, if we can get some support with that. So please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Turn on the little bell so you get notifications. Shoot any of us a DM and let us know. You can also see in the comment sections our social tree, so you can find all of the links to all of the Steel City Rings podcast pages on every social media platform that's out there. Guys, am I forgetting anything?
No, I don't think so.
But we'll have articles on the website. Bob is gonna have that going pretty soon.
Yep. We are working on the website and getting articles on it. You can stay tuned for that.
Yes, and stay tuned. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be putting out shorts during the week with, topical stuff, just quick reaction stuff leading up to the show, kind of previews of what we're going to be talking about, all that good stuff.
Yeah, but we really do want to hear from you. So if you agree, if you disagree, if you have another comment to make, if you have a question, you have a topic you want us to address, we want to hear all of those things from you, and we'll mention them on the next show. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.